Hey, math class, I wanted to give you a little preview of one thing. We'll be talking about it a little bit in class tomorrow. It's a trick for simplifying when you have zeros in the numbers that you're trying to simplify in your fraction. Especially the zeros at the end, those are the ones we're looking for. I like to call it the zero rule. That's how we'll sort of refer to it in class. But I think that us teachers here at Green River gave it that name. I don't really think that the rest of the world knows it as that. But anyway, it's kind of a cool thing that you can do to help reduce fractions, simplify them down if they have zeros on the end. So if I have 50 over 60 and I want to reduce this fraction down, the first thing that I'm going to do, right, is I'm going to find the greatest common factor that both of them have. And I could do that by listing them out. For example, if I have 50, the factors of that are, 1 and... I'm off the screen. 1 and 50, and then I have 2 and 25. I have 3 can't go in, 4 can't go in, 5 and 10, and I think that's all of them. And then I could list out the factors of 60. And kind of do all of that. But what I'm going to find is that 10 is going to be the largest on both of those. And actually I can tell that by looking at these two numbers because they both have a 0 in the end. 10 is going to be the largest factor that I'm going to divide out of both of these. Okay, so let me reach another board here. I could say, okay, 10 into 50. I need to know how many times that goes. Well, that goes 5. And I could do all this math, right? Okay, and then 10 into 60, that goes 6 times. I could do all the math to find that it was 5/6. Or I could just go like that and cross those zeros off. And so by doing that, by just getting rid of those extra zeros, you can see that what I'm left with is 5 over 6. And so then I know that that's my answer. Let's look at another example, because this is kind of one of those things. It definitely, lots of examples I think are good because it feels like it should be harder. And sometimes I think it's confusing because it's kind of... everybody's like, but it should be more difficult than this. Here's 400 over 700. And again, I could list out all of their factors, but that's a lot of work. These are big numbers. So if I'm going to look at them, I could say, well, 10 could go in because I see I've got zeros. But this one, I actually have 2 zeros on the end. So that means I could take out 100. And again, I could go 100 into 400 and do all the math for that. But again, a lot of work, especially when I could just go, well, I've got a set of zeros here I can cross off. I've got a set of zeros here I can cross off. I've essentially just divided both of these numbers by 100, and that equals 4/7, because again, all I've got left right here is 4/7. So 400 over 700, you can reduce it all the way down to 4/7. Here's another example. 1,000 over 2,100. This is a big number fraction. Again, I don't want to have to work that hard by dividing out whatever I can divide out or listing out all of their factors. I'm just going to use the 0 rule. I've got a 0 above a 0 here, so I'm going to cross those guys out. I have a 0 above a 0 here, so I'm going to cross those guys out. But that's as far as I can go, because right here I only have a 0 on top. It would be nice if it was over 2,000, because then I could take one more. But because I have this 1 right there, I can only go over 2 spots, and then I'm actually left with 10 over 21. So I can't go any farther, but that's okay. I've taken off quite a bit to reduce it down to this fraction. Let's look at another example of that when other numbers get in the way. Let's look at this one. So 2030 over 3,300. So again, big number fraction. But as you can see, this is the only one that I've got them directly over each other. So that's the only set of zeros I can take off using the zero rule. And then I'm left with 203 over 300. That's my answer. Or no, I lied. Not 300. 330. That's my answer right there. Okay, you say, but I've got a 0 here and a 0 there. Well, I can't take them off unless they line up directly above each other, if they're in the same place value. So you see how these guys are zeros in the ones place? This is a 0 in the tens place. This one's a 0 in the hundreds. So I'd only be able to take them off if there was another 0 in the tens place here. Also, if I had, for example, I'm going to change this really fast here. If I had 300 on the bottom, let's just say, and you say, aha, but there's a 0 right here in the hundreds place and in the hundreds place right here. Well, I still can't take those off because of this guy. Anytime you run into a number, it automatically stops everything. It has to be numbers off on the side here that that are the ones that you can take off using the zero rule. So we'll be practicing this more again in class. I know it's a weird thing. I'll give you at least 3 more problems to practice this, and hopefully you'll kind of get over the weird feeling that everybody has. It's probably not just you. Everybody has that feeling of it should be harder than this. So anyway, we'll see you tomorrow.